Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to get right into a case that I think a lot of people followed very, very closely.
Absolutely. The November 2022 quadruple homicide in Moscow, Idaho.
Exactly. And we've got a pretty dense stack of material here, so our mission for this deep dive is, well, it's pretty simple. We're just going to stick to the facts.
Right. We're distilling what the sources say about the timeline, the key clues, and of course the identity of the person they eventually arrested.
And to start, you really have to look at the setting. That's where the shock, I think, really begins.
It is. I mean, the material describes Moscow, Idaho as this quintessential small college town, just a quiet place.
The kind of place where this sort of violence is just, it's unthinkable.
Completely.
And that contrast is why this case just immediately grabbed the entire country's attention. We're talking about 4 young students.
Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Goncalves.
All living in a rental house, right near the University of Idaho campus. And the material lays out what was a pretty typical Saturday night that just ended in
unimaginable brutality. All inside that house in the early hours of November 13th, 2022.
What makes those first details so chilling is just how fast it all happened, the calculated speed of it.
Yeah, this wasn't some kind of, prolonged struggle that spilled out onto the street or made a lot of noise.
No.
Everything we've read says it was contained, swift, and almost professionally executed based on the timeline the investigators put together.
Okay, let's focus on that timeline because it's incredibly, incredibly narrow and it says so much about the attacker.
It really does.
Based on cell phone data, video analysis, everything. They've locked the attack window down to sometime between 4:0 and 4:25 a.m.
25 minutes.
25 minutes maximum. To commit 4 fatal stabbings inside a house with 6 people in it.
That window, that narrowness, is probably the first huge clue that points to premeditation. It suggests planning.
Right.
The investigation concluded the attacker moved, and this is the phrase they use, quickly and deliberately.
And despite the absolute horror happening on those upper floors, there were no signs of trouble outside.
None. No neighbors calling 911, no broken windows, no sustained screaming that anyone heard.
It almost had to be a complete surprise attack. The sources say the 4 victims were stabbed to death.
And it happened either while they slept or attempted to defend themselves.
That kind of sudden, intimate violence,
Yes.
it requires extreme planning to pull that off without alerting the entire neighborhood.
It does. And, the fact that 2 other roommates survived, and they were seemingly unaware of what had happened until much later, that just reinforces how silent and how rapid the whole thing was.
So let's pivot to the next morning, the aftermath, because that's when the chaos really started.
The surviving roommates woke up, and the reports say they were just confused.
Understandably.
Yeah, and the police weren't even called until later in the day.
But when they did arrive, the description of the scene, it's stark. The material says it shocked even experienced investigators.
And that tells you everything you need to know about the level of brutality they walked into.
It also meant that the Moscow Police Department, of a smaller local force, was suddenly dealing with this massive, high-profile,
Incredibly bloody crime scene.
a crime scene with no immediate suspects, no witnesses, nothing.
And that vacuum of information that followed, that's what led to this intense panic in the community.
That delay in identifying anyone, coupled with the sheer terror of knowing someone capable of this, was just out there, walking free.
It paralyzed the town for weeks.
The sources really highlight that societal impact. The University of Idaho campus, it basically became a ghost town.
Parents were pulling their kids out of school.
We can't blame them?
No, of course not.
Yeah.
And while the official channels were, understandably tight-lipped while they processed this hugely complex scene, social media just filled that void.
Oh, it exploded. Rumors were everywhere.
Wildfire. And the public was just constantly asking these critical questions. Was it a targeted attack? Was the killer a stranger? Is he still here?
That put enormous pressure on the investigator.
Huge pressure.
Okay, so let's unpack the investigative strategy here. The public wanted answers right away, but the police really had a cold case on their hands, at least in terms of, traditional evidence.
They had no witness statements, nothing like that, so they had to pivot. They had to rely entirely on modern forensics.
Precisely. And if you look at the blueprint for the investigation, it really stands on 3 pillars of evidence, right?
Exactly. DNA analysis, cell phone data, and surveillance footage.
And this pivot is what eventually moved the case from being a complete mystery to a concrete set of charges.
It really highlights the shift in modern crime solving, doesn't it?
Yeah.
From interviews and footprints to just digital breadcrumbs.
That digital strategy is where this case completely broke open, because for all the noise online, all the rumors,
The breakthrough came from the oldest kind of evidence, really, something physical.
something physical from the scene, which they then connected back to a very, very modern trail.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Because the central clue, the physical clue, was subtle, but it was recurring. It was a specific vehicle.
A white Hyundai Elantra.
Right. Surveillance footage captured it driving repeatedly near the house around the time of the murders.
But it wasn't just a single sighting. That's the key here. The investigators, they pieced together footage from cameras all over that small town.
So they built a pattern of movement for that car.
Yes, a pattern that suggested it wasn't just passing by, it suggested suspicious intent.
They were looking for a car that seemed to be circling, scouting the area.
And what's so fascinating is how that vehicle sighting then became the key to unlocking all the digital dots.
The Elantra was the thread they could pull. Once they identified the vehicle, they could start narrowing down cell tower pings, user profiles.
So they didn't just have a car anymore, they had a kind of ghost user attached to it.
Exactly, and that cell phone data was absolutely critical in painting a picture of premeditation.
Wow.
Well, the records placed the eventual suspect near that area multiple times before the night of the murders.
Wow.
Yeah. So, based on that information, this wasn't a spontaneous act. It suggested, detailed scouting, learning the area, maybe tracking the habits of the people who lived there.
That pattern of surveillance is what really separates this from just a random act of violence.
It does. But while that digital trail established the pattern, there was a second piece of evidence that established the definitive link to the crime itself.
And that link was the DNA.
The DNA found on a knife sheath that was recovered at the scene.
This is arguably the most crucial piece of physical evidence in the whole case.
It has to be. A knife sheath is so intimately connected to the weapon. It places the attacker's DNA right there, at the most violent moment of the crime.
And for anyone who follows forensics, the challenge isn't just finding DNA, it's finding a match when the suspect isn't already in some database.
Right. And the sources say the DNA they found was eventually linked to one person, Bryan Kohberger.
So it's that combination then. The irrefutable physical evidence, the DNA, and the irrefutable digital evidence, the cell data, and the Elantra.
That's what closed the net.
And that convergence, it all led to the climax of the investigation, the arrest of Bryan Kohberger in December of 2022.
Miles and miles away from Moscow, Idaho.
And the irony of who he was, of his background, that's what just amplified the public interest tenfold. This wasn't some drifter with a long criminal record. He was a PhD student in criminology.
Someone actively dedicating his life to studying the mechanics of crime, criminal behavior, the very procedures that law enforcement uses.
It's a chilling paradox, isn't it?
It's the most chilling part of the whole narrative. If we sort of connect this to the bigger picture, it just raises these profound questions about studying deviance itself.
Like, did his academic knowledge make him feel confident that he could outsmart the system?
Maybe his knowledge gave him the tools, but he severely underestimated the power of the digital footprint he was leaving behind.
So we know Kohberger's been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. He's pleaded not guilty.
And the case is still moving through the legal system.
Which means the sources we have, they really leave us with 3 major unanswered questions. The questions that are still driving the public narrative.
And they're the foundational why questions that the physical evidence can't answer on its own.
The first 2 being, why that house? And why those specific students?
Was there some unknown connection? Or was the targeting just based on opportunity, on what he saw when he was scouting the location? We just don't know yet.
And then there's the third question, the one that truly sets this case apart. It's that huge psychological mystery.
How did someone dedicating their life to understanding and analyzing criminal justice allegedly become the center of this uniquely chilling crime story?
These are the mysteries that are still resonating.
The material really shows us a case where the attacker seems to have meticulously planned the crime, the timeline,
but then appears to have critically failed in controlling his digital presence. And of course, leaving that one critical piece of physical evidence behind.
a fatal mistake.
So, what does this all mean? Let's sum it up. We've traced the facts from that brutal, swift attack in that very narrow 25-minute window. We've looked at the weeks of terrifying fear in the community caused by that information vacuum.
Right.
And we've analyzed the case they built, this meticulous case constructed on the convergence of digital and biological evidence.
It's tracking the white Elantra, reviewing the cell phone pings that showed prior scouting.
And securing that definitive DNA link from the knife sheath. And it all led to the arrest of the criminology student, Bryan Kohberger.
I think this investigation really serves as a powerful example of where modern crime fighting is today.
How so?
Even when you don't have traditional witnesses, the sheer volume of data we all generate every single day makes hiding in plain sight almost impossible.
Every movement, every ping, every credit card swipe.
It all becomes an anchor point for investigators to latch onto.
And that leads to a final provocative thought for you to think about. Given how much the sources emphasize the role of cell phone data, of surveillance footage,
All those digital breadcrumbs.
right, connecting those breadcrumbs to a physical location was everything here. So what does the sheer volume of personal digital data available to investigators today mean for our definition of privacy?
That's a huge question, especially for someone who thinks they know how to cover their tracks.
Exactly. I mean, if a deep knowledge of criminal procedure and forensic science can't mask your digital presence, is there any true anonymity left for those who want to commit these kinds of calculated crimes?